The Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP program, is really trying to allow companies to gain access to certain funding from the government to help pay and maintain payroll levels and payroll personnel for a 2-month period, to allow the economic impact of this to be understood a little bit, while maintaining an employee base and while maintaining people to help them get through this process.
Well, welcome to a new special edition episode of the Made in America podcast. I'm Ari Santiago, President, CEO of IT Direct. Really excited to have Frank Milone, who's a partner at Fiondella, Milone Lasaracina, FML, great accounting firm in Glastonbury, Connecticut. Frank, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you spending some time with me this morning.
No problem. Thanks, Ari.
So listen, I wanted to do this very special episode. We generally have manufacturing leaders and related people, but with what's happening right now with COVID-19, there's the CARES Act that's been released, and everyone's talking about the PPP. I think it's the Payroll Protection Program. Here we are on April 2nd. I think applications start tomorrow. There's a lot of anxiety about getting in first, and do I qualify? Do I not qualify? What do I get? And I'm happy to have you on to sort of talk about that. So before we do, can you just really briefly give us a high level of, what is FML and what do you guys do?
Yeah, FML is just a full service accounting firm headquartered in Glastonbury. We have offices in Enfield and New Haven, Stamford, and throughout the entire state of Connecticut. Over 80 people, 13 partners, and just looking forward to continuing to serve our clients here in Connecticut and beyond. So
that's great. Well, listen, Frank, let's just get right into it. So what should people be thinking about when it comes to the PPP? What's the value they can get, and who should be thinking about applying?
Yeah, the value is really, as many people know, there's so much uncertainty here in what the economic impact is going to be for companies as they try to grapple with the changes that we're all incurring here as a result of the pandemic. The Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP program, is really trying to allow companies to gain access to certain funding from the government to help pay and maintain payroll levels and payroll personnel for a 2-month period, to allow the economic impact of this to be understood a little bit, while maintaining an employee base and while maintaining people to help them get through this process. So they're providing this money, and people can apply for it. And as a result of that, it can be used for mostly payroll, but also other costs associated with maintaining operations over a 2-month period.
So when I watch the news, I hear a lot of people saying, one of the goals of this program is to try and keep people employed, because they've seen that getting people off the unemployment rolls back in is a lot longer of a period of time and a lot more costly than just helping keep people on the payrolls for longer. So is that kind of the focus of this program?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's think about it. You run a business, I run a business. We understand completely the value of maintaining your employees that you've built over a long period of time. They're very valuable, and we want to treat them right, especially in this time of need. You want to keep them employed when you can, but you're also maintaining a business, so you're also trying to project cash flow and making sure that you're going to be able to do what's right for the business. This act is trying to infuse cash into the economy and into small businesses, to try to give them more flexibility to maintain those levels of payroll and maintain those employee bases, so that they can get through this, kind of uncertainty right now.
Yeah, a little bit. So who should apply? Like, I know there's this term small business. There's confusion about who should apply, who shouldn't apply. Do I have to be losing money to apply? Do I have to wait till I have a problem to apply? Like, who should apply, Frank?
Yeah, most people should apply. I think there's the application has been kind of drafted and is on, I think, the Treasury website at this point, and you'll see the fact that there is a certification that's needed by the company and all of its, I think, owners that are 20% or more owners within the company. that there's an uncertainty that's driving the need for them to apply for this funding.
So we just have to say that we believe that to be true.
Yeah, you have to certify in the application. You're going to have to certify for a couple of things, and one of them is my business is facing an uncertainty as to future economic impact because of the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all facing, and that's really one of the only requirements that you need. You know, you don't have to be losing money. You don't have to have laid off certain numbers of employees. Quite frankly, it's really to say, listen, my business is going to be impacted by this. I know it's going to be. I just don't know how. And as a result of that, I believe the money and the funding would help me maintain my levels of employment and my salary levels for an 8-week period.
So I just want to be clear on this. Like, so if let's say that I'm running like a medical device manufacturer, I'm running a small business. I haven't yet seen the impact on me, but I know my customers or my customers' customers are being impacted. So I know eventually that train's coming to my station. That's enough for me to say, certify that I think I'm going to be impacted and then apply.
Yeah, I mean, this is a decision that you have to make as a management team, right? Yes, if you have uncertainty as to maybe not right now, you know, my cash flow is still there. My employees are still able to be busy, but I know, or I think that my customer base is going to eventually slow down because of either supply chain issues or availability for their own personnel to work.
Yeah,
I know that I'm going to have cash flow issues, or I think I'm going to have cash flow issues. If you have that feeling, you should apply. But if if you think you're doing great and for some reason your industry is on the uptick because you're providing surgical masks or you're doing other things and you know that your business is not going to stop, that's a decision you need to make as to saying, maybe I don't apply because I know there's more companies out there that are in a time of need that should maybe get access to this money more than me. But for the most part, most companies are not understanding what the impact would be. And so most companies that I've talked to and all of my clients, 90% of them are going to try to apply for the PPP.
So what's the definition of small business in the realm of PPP?
Yeah, and technically it's driven by SBA rules, and the SBA rules, most people are looking at it under 500 employees technically is a small business. There are some technical rules that are sitting within there as far as affiliation rules in regards to whether you have stockholders, majority or minority holders that have certain control rights or provisions or the ability to control your company. Those get very complex, and we're dealing with that on some of my client base.
Like meaning if my small business is owned by a large business or partially owned by a large business, that type of thing?
Correctly. If you have minority holders that are owned, either 50% or more, that's an automatic affiliation where you now need to combine those companies when you do the employee count. If you have venture capital backed companies or companies that are invested in by a venture capital and you have minority holders, there's certain rules as to determining whether those minority holders are also affiliates. And as such, the combining of the employee bases needs to happen to define whether you're still qualifying under a small business rule.
And if some of the employees are part-time or full-time, does that impact the employee count for the 500?
I don't know that exactly off the top of my head, but I think it's all full and part-time employees in the count. But again, I would have to go back and check that. Sorry.
And if I have a division that's overseas, right? Let's say the majority of my employees are Connecticut employees, but I've got a Costa Rica or an Asian division or whatever. Does that impact, number one, I guess, do those employees count? Do we even know that? And number two, would that impact my ability to qualify?
Yeah, I think when you start getting into companies that have divisions, you get into these ownership concepts again, okay? So if I'm a division and I'm 100% owned by a parent, then I would think that all of those divisions need to be consolidated when you're doing the employee count. Overseas ownership is definitely an issue for qualification for the SBA loans in general. And when you look at the PPP application, there is a certification that's being asked for every owner and 20% or more owner of a business, and they have to be a U.S. citizen in order to qualify for the PPP program. So without going into too much depth of complexity, if you have foreign ownership, if you have multiple divisions, you have to go in and understand under the SBA rules, how do you go through your employee count? And then how do you go through your foreign ownership provisions to make sure that you're not getting kicked out for SBA loan provision? And
So
yes, just so you know, Ari, I mean, most people don't understand this, but the SBA program obviously has been out there forever.
Right.
The PPP program is just being bolted into the SBA program. So the SBA rules on all of this sort of ownership, employee count, what defines itself as a small business, this is all being governed by SBA. It's not being governed by the CARE Act.
So the good news on that part is that at least we can get some confidence in what was there before from a qualifications perspective. So now it's a matter of just looking at the companies and measuring them up to known SBA qualifications that have been around for a long time.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And there's you know, the SBA has resources, I believe, on their website that have SBA expertise that can help you go through the SBA guidance if you have questions.
Listen, I hear that. At the end of this, I want to get to like, who can we just call? Because I'm sure the website's got all kinds of stuff, but I'm trying to run my business, manage my business, deal with like the day-to-day stuff. I don't have time to go to SBA websites. Although
we'll get there. Yep.
So let's talk about this. So when I'm looking at doing this, what should I anticipate being able to qualify for? You know, there's different things out there, multiples of this, multiples of that. Like, can you just give it to me quick and, you know, just quick and simple? When I'm looking at it, how do I figure out about where I would be able to qualify?
Yeah, it comes down to, I think the loan amount is up to 10 million, but it's based upon, you got to go back 12 months, and over the last 12 months, you got to calculate your average monthly payroll, and you multiply that amount by 2.5, and that's what you're going to ask or qualify for under the PPP. But payroll cost is defined within the Act, and there are a lot of things that you need to go through in calculating what that monthly average payroll is. You cannot include compensation for any employee over $100,000. There are other aspects as to what is included and excluded in regards to, you know, vacation, group benefit pay, reimbursements of certain benefits. But when you look at it and step back, it really relates to what's your average monthly payroll over the last 12 months times 2.5, and you got to go in and make sure that you understand average monthly payroll as defined in the Act has certain limitations, and you just have to go through and calculate that.
And so is the idea that if I get my application in sooner, I'm more likely to get full funding?
I think technically the program is open until June. The reality of it is it is a very large sum of money. But as we've seen here in Connecticut, when they've dropped 75 or whatever it was.
So there's 25 million, but 75,000 per company max. Yeah.
Correct. And it was 25 million that quickly in a day and a half got basically inundated with applications. Most of the people we're talking to are basically saying, listen, get your application in as soon as you can, understanding that for the PPP program, you're doing that through a bank. Qualified SBA lender. Most often, most banks, well-known banks, will be SBA lenders that are approved to go through this PPP program. And then get it in as quickly as you can. It's supposed to be a quick turnaround, but the banks are assuming high volume starting on Friday. I don't even, you know, some of the banks are still working through the mechanics of trying to get this application either online or through third-party providers. So still a lot of uncertainty that's happening. Get it in as soon as possible, because they do believe that it could take up to a week to get these applications approved, even though I believe the intent was to turn them around within 24 hours, but I'm not sure in the immediate term that's going to happen. So
how long, and I know this is maybe a question that no one can answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How long do you anticipate, or do you think it will be between get my application in and money flows?
Yeah, I don't know. Uncertain. We just had another client of ours ask us this question. I would say a week, but I'm guessing. I'm doing this based upon feedback that I'm hearing and things that I'm reading, just like everybody else, trying to follow as much of the guidance that's coming out. But I think the goal is to get it into the economy as quickly as possible. The reality is banks are going to need ramp up time. The applications need to be reviewed internally at the banks. So there's a process that the banks are trying to put into place to get that process expedited. But as you may imagine, it's probably going to take a little bit longer than 24 hours to get this money to applicants.
Yeah, a week still would be pretty fast. So, and this may be just trivial, but I'm just curious. Like, does the money come from the bank? So, if I apply to like a local bank, a People's or a Webster or whatever, like, is the money coming from them, or do they go to like the feds and get the money from the like? Is that does
Yeah, I
it
don't
get?
know. I don't know how the back office works. I believe the banks are administering the program, and I think the money's coming from the federal government.
Okay.
And I think there's probably a normal process to how that funding flows from the federal government to the local banking systems and that sort of thing.
So, there's a lot of talk that this money that you get could be forgiven. And, listen, that's obviously something people are really interested in. So, I mean, what do we need to do to be in a position to have it forgiven? And yeah, well, let's just start with that.
Well, I think there is a lot of confusion here too, because the way the act was written, for some of us who like to read, a couple of people in my firm have actually read the entire act. The loan
800 plus pages.
Yeah, exactly. The loan forgiveness guidance is, it seems straightforward when you read some of the summaries that are out there. And the way we think it's intended to work is if you maintain employee levels through the 8-week period post-loan and salary levels within a 25%, you cannot reduce salaries more than 25% for people making up to $100,000. Because again, that's the qualified payroll number, yep. Right? If you maintain salary levels and you maintain employee levels for those 8-week period, and you should be able to get majority of those loan proceeds forgiven at that point in time. Again, if you do reduce your salary levels and you do reduce your employee headcount, it doesn't mean you won't qualify for any reduction or any forgiveness, excuse me. What it may mean is that part of your loan may not be forgiven based upon the levels of change in those two factors.
So if it's not forgiven, do we know what the interest rate is, or are there penalties?
Right. The way the act was written, the interest rate was up to 4%. It could be up to 4%. I believe the application that I saw had the interest rate currently at 0.5%, very low interest rate. I think the term for repayment was up to 10 years. I think I saw recently that the current way it's being documented is a 2-year payback. There is a deferral provision where you can get request a 6-month deferral to start paying that back. And then I believe you can do that up to 12 months. So there's definitely repayment. I believe right now I'm telling my companies expect a 2-year payback at this point.
A 2-year payback, and worst case, are you estimating a worst case 4% and then be pleasantly surprised, or should people be thinking 0.5?
No, I think the application right now is 0.5%, and I think the act when it was written said up to 4%. I don't know enough to know if is that a variable rate or a fixed rate, but I believe right now what I think it's happening, and I have to confirm this by looking at the final application, is we're assuming it's a 0.5% fixed rate payable back over a 2-year periot.
That's awesome.
If not forgiven.
If not forgiven. So let me just 2 last quick questions, Frank. I know you're super busy. Should anybody be worried about applying? We talked a little bit about foreign ownership and different stuff. Like, is there any risk to applying, or is there, could there be any risk there that I should be concerned about before I just throw in an application?
Yeah, there are definitely, when you look at the act and when you look at the application, there's a certification process that's going to need to be done by the owner of the business and anybody who owns 20% or more of the business, that you've gone through and you determine that you're qualifying, right, under the SBA rules. And we've talked about, the 500 employee rules and some of those, foreign ownership. And then you also have to qualify or certify, that your business has enough uncertainty in the future relating to the pandemic that you need the money. So, they're not going to come in and look at revenue numbers. And from what I understand, they're not going to do that. So, it's kind of like there's a process where the ownership needs to go through and make sure that A, they qualify, B, that they need the money under the terms that are being provided by the CARES Act, and then they should apply. So, other than going through that process, I don't believe there's any there's no hesitation other than the fact of making sure you qualify and make sure that you are asking for the money relating to the reason why the money's being given.
So listen, this thing opens up tomorrow. I want to be ready. I've got my business to run. Where do I go for help? Am I calling my accountant? Am I calling my attorney? Am I trying to do it myself? Like, what's your guidance there?
The guidance. I mean, most of what's required on the application is financial information, payroll. You need the payroll support. You're going to need to give payroll documents, records. You're going to need a calculation underneath those records to calculate the qualified payroll, as far as, only including over $100,000 of compensation and some of the other adjustments. So you're definitely going to need an account, whether it's your internal accounting personnel to help you pull those records together, or whether you need an accounting firm to help you do that if you outsource your accounting. You're definitely going to need an accountant to help you through that process as part of your business. If you have questions on the whole process, like my accounting firm is putting up there, all of the accounting firms are putting out guidance in relation to understanding the program, the CARES Act, the PPP, the disaster loan process. So you can go to your accounting firm that you have a relationship with and have them, help you understand it. I would also talk to your lawyer if you have any questions on whether you qualify, as far as ownership questions, foreign ownership. And then lastly is reach out to your bank immediately, even before you apply, to make sure that they're participating in the program. If they're not participating in the program, where you can go to get access to the program to another bank, and then making sure that if you have any questions on the SBA program in general, the banks have more knowledge on that because they're SBA lending experts. So I would think all three of those aspects are really resources that you should be tapping into.
So start with your accounting firm. If you've got questions about qualification, foreign ownership, any of those complexities, make sure you contact your lawyer and get your banker on the horn and get them ready.
Yeah,
your app is coming. Make sure that you're sending it to a place that qualifies.
Absolutely.
Nice. Listen, Frank, I so appreciate it. I know you're busy. Thanks so much for your time today in our little COVID-19 PPP prep chat. I'll talk to you soon, man.
All right. Stay safe. Stay healthy, everyone. All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Frank.
Bye.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.